about the relationship between science and religion. Um, Now, one of the issues about that is that the only way you can have a dialogue or have a relationship between two things is if you already agree on what science is and what religion is. And the more I look at cases in history, and sometimes when I look at cases in the present, um, I find it often to be the case that we can't always tell which side is the science and which side is the religion. In the case of the Scopes trial, which is what I wrote my first book about, famous trial of a school teacher who willingly violated Tennessee's law prohibiting the teaching of evolution, an issue that, of course, we don't have to worry about anymore, almost a century later. There were opposing views about what counted as the religion or what counted as the science. For someone like Clarence Darrow, who defended Scopes at the trial, the very notion of religious literalism was incoherent as a religious proposition. It didn't even make sense. It was, if in the kind of common sense, not even wrong. What he thought was necessary was to show that there were versions of religious views that were compatible with an evolutionary narrative. On the other hand, someone like William Jennings Bryan, his opponent in that, the former Secretary of State, the former 3 times presidential candidate, and the son of Nebraska itself, for Bryan, evolution wasn't a science. It was an ideology that made claims of the historical past, but it wasn't scientific because it wasn't based in natural observation as he understood it. So sometimes we look at events and we can clearly say, this fits within the larger Venn diagram of science and religion, but where you put things in the intersecting circles is a matter of dispute. And so rather than say, here's science, here's religion, let's smush them together and see if they get along, let's draw the big tent about science and religion and see if we can do the demarcation work inside. Sometimes there are cases where that is going to be really complicated, and it's still something that happens today. I cannot advance my slide because there is, oh, there we go. Now let's see if I can advance my slide. Oh, why am I? There we go. Okay, here's an example of something that happened just a few months ago, which really shows the entanglement, if you will, quantum level entanglement, perhaps, of science and religion. The launch of the JWST, the Space Telescope, by NASA and many of its international partners, took place on December 25th, a date that many people consider to be calendarically significant, especially in the United States. Among the people who took note of that particular date was NASA Administrator Bill Nelson himself, who pointed out, as you see on this quote, that it was significant that there were so many delays and that led it to be Christmas Day. He refers to references to the stories of the Christmas star, and the idea that this in turn inspired people to travel. But it also, more specifically and more broadly, reminds him of the Psalms and the words of King David, the alleged author of the Psalms, who he refers to as a millennia before that a shepherd grazing in his sheep would look up at the night sky, and he became a poet. And later it says he became a king, and said, the heavens declare the glory of God, the firmament shows his handiwork. Quite honestly, that's a beautiful sentiment, right? The idea that if you are coming from a religious point of view, that you would see it in the heavens. This is a long-standing religious viewpoint. One of my favorite expressions of this comes from the naturalist John Ray in the 17th century, who, in describing the creations and wonders of the modern world around us, suggested that human beings had the ability to bend their necks upwards, which is something that most other mammals, most other animals were not able to do. And we were given this ability specifically because God wanted us to be able to gaze upon the stars and reflect upon their glory. Now, the first time I mentioned this John Ray quote in class, when I was teaching, I had a student who immediately said, no, this is because we're bipeds. This is because we walk upright and we bend our necks the same 90-degree angle that other animals do. So whether you think that the heavens are a testament to the fact that space is the final frontier or the face is the spinal frontier, this is an opportunity for us to consider what it means by the fact that we are capable of looking at the world around us. For someone like Bill Nelson, this is an entanglement of religion and science. But as I can discuss, the fact that he made this comment received an immediate amount of blowback. It received a lot of questions about whether it was appropriate for a US government official and the head of NASA to be invoking religion at a time like this. People were also wondering whether, in our politically polarized environment and the role that Christian nationalism plays in that, whether Nelson was signaling that NASA itself was undertaking scientific missions for the sake of creating kind of a Christian dominion narrative and extending that domination and that kind of colonial sense out into space. So this is touching on real politics issues. This is touching on real policy issues, and it's actually affecting the kind of scientific research and work that gets done today. Of course, the JWST also produces images like this, images that seem calculated to extort a sense of awe and wonder. I will tell you, the lens flare probably doesn't actually exist in nature. These are parts of what is going into the production of a physical image, despite the fact that the JWST has created some incredible images. It's important for us to realize there's nowhere you could go. You couldn't get into a magic space device and just go somewhere and see something that looks like this background. You couldn't see something like this. This is built on a series of tacit aesthetics. And there's been a few sociologists and historians of science who have talked a lot about how NASA creates what they actually call pretty pictures. That this builds upon aesthetics that come to us from as diverse a range of things as ancient works of art and movies, like 2001 or Star Trek. So, again, these aesthetics are kind of playing into an idea that we as human receivers of these images are buying into a certain sense of awe and wonder. And even in the non-visual, in the textual realm, that's part of the story of science communication that goes all the way back to theories of religion that invoke nature. As Jocelyn mentioned in the intro, something I've written about a little bit more, about how ideas about natural theology, about the idea that you can find evidence of God in nature, actually played a major role in creating the genre of popular science that we're familiar with today. But it's hard not to look at things like this and to do what Bill Nelson says we are doing in looking further back in time. We are looking into the moments of creation, and creation is a very loaded word. And so I want to talk a little bit about historical theories of creation and where those creep in. For many of us, depending on our sort of exposure to religious ideas early in life, we are probably familiar with the idea that creation means the sudden instantiation of something from nothing. Creation ex nihilo, from nothing, is often the term that theologians throw around. Interestingly enough, while this idea is widespread and is a widespread interpretation of the theory of what creation in a biblical sense is supposed to mean, it's not clear that this is the way that people in biblical times would have interpreted it. There's a fascinating talk by Jaroslav Pelikan, who talked about the history of theories of creation and how the Genesis narrative was interpreted, arguing that most of the people at the time that Genesis would have been composed and initially read saw creation as a matter of providing form to matter that was already there, as opposed to the sudden creation ex nihilo. The interesting thing about Pelikan's talk is where he delivered this, which was in the 1959 centennial celebration of Darwin's Origin of Species at the University of Chicago. So if you think about probably one of the landmark events in the history of science and religion throughout the past century, this was one of the most kind of perhaps important academic events of that time. And here he is coming in and saying, we can discuss the theories of science and religion by better understanding that creation doesn't always mean out of nowhere. But there are other aspects to this theory of creation that are important for us to understand that existed historically, and in some particular religious interpretations continue to exist today. One of the big questions that remains is sort of the question of what it means to even do the work of creating. That is to say, is creation something that is purely informatic, is abstract, exists in the mind of some kind of a god? Is it, if you will, an intelligent design? Or does a creation actually need to have an implementation as well? This is something that modern debates about theory of evolution or the origin of life or the origin of the universe sometimes sidestep, is that even if you could imagine something that has an informatic idea of here's how we're going to create the flagellum, here's how we're going to create the hemoglobin or something like that, okay, but how are you actually going to go physically manifest that in the world? And sometimes that is left as sort of as an abstraction, that if we can see traces of design in the formal structures, that we can therefore infer things about the theology behind it. This remains a sticking point in a lot of these conversations. Another aspect of the idea of creation, or the idea of what a divine act would be to say that creation or miraculous intervention is something that specifically goes against the laws of nature. So in the biblical story, when it talks about the idea of a creator God separating light from darkness, this is going precisely against the laws of thermodynamics, in which light diffuses into the world, and eventually we get a heat death of the universe. If natural circumstances run in the way that we now understand them to run, then eventually everything is going to be homogenized and kind of evened out from an energetics point of view. So the fact that we can then look at that language of creation as working against the natural laws, as being sort of, if you will, what historically was sometimes referred to as rewinding the clock, rewinding the mechanism, we can see the idea that creation is something that is distinct and apart from science. But the final one that I want to talk about, and I think the one that is perhaps most important and gets us back to the title of my talk, is the idea of continuous creation. And this is a theory that has antecedents going way back for centuries, but has also been present in debates about cosmology today. The idea that there are ongoing processes, including the pair creation of particles, or the idea of the continuous creation of matter and energy in the universe. But these ideas go back and lead to various philosophical theories about how it is that we form knowledge about science. So one of the things that I want to talk about in particular is this idea that continual creation is what is used to support a philosophical theory that's sometimes referred to as occasionalism. Occasionalism, I put a picture of the patent for a flip book here, because I think that is perhaps the best way to illustrate it. If you are creating a flip book by hand, you have to draw one sheet, turn it over, draw the next sheet, slightly different, turn it over, draw the next sheet. Nothing from the first sheet automatically represents itself on the second sheet. This is a picture of God in every single second of time, or every single nanosecond or moment of time, doing the work of creating the whole world brand new over and over and over again. This is not the kind of thing that we do when we do CGI animation, where we create an object and then move it through multiple frames. For those of you who are doing any kind of computer graphics design or doing any computer programming, you know that this is actually a terrible art, the flip book is a terrible, arduous process. But more importantly, the flip book relies on our minds to fill in the motion for us. There's nothing moving in a flip book. When we flip it, our eyes experience what's called flicker fusion. We begin to interpret motion and continuity, and then we see a windmill spinning around, the person walking, whatever the flip book is showing us. Occasionalism works in something like the same way. The world now is based on what the world a moment previously was like, but not because things persist, but because they are constantly being allowed to, if you will, be created again and again by this creative act of God. This is what Descartes alludes to in the third meditation, whether he was an occasionalist or not. It's probably the case that in this quote, he's considering this idea, not necessarily endorsing it, but some of the later Cartesians very much seem to embrace occasionalism. This idea that the act of preserving the world and the act of creating the world are the same acts when it comes to the powers of God. And so therefore, the idea that things from one moment to the next seem to do things like follow the laws of physics, seem to continue to act in predictable, rational ways, isn't something that happens because the world is constrained to do that, but because God chooses to do so and provide a sense of order and rationality to the universe. There are problems with this theory. And there are not just scientific problems with this theory, but religious problems. On the other hand, the idea of the one scientific problem with this is that it means that there's no laws of nature that are guaranteed or certain. There's no law of nature that God couldn't just say, I was only doing that as a favor to you. I'm going to stop for a minute. But for the religious audiences that someone like Descartes and his contemporaries were writing about, people who were looking at both evidence of scripture and nature to try to put together a coherent theology, the problem with occasionalism is that it really only lasts for about 6 days, and then it stops. Because the creation narrative that in the Western religious traditions that draw from Genesis believe in, there is a story that says that God created the world actively for 6 days, and then on the 7th day, God rested. What does that mean? What does it mean to say that God stopped? This passage from Genesis 2:1 is a highly important one. And it raises an important question that's a serious challenge to occasionalism, both historically and now, which is to say that if preserving the world and creating the world is the same, then what is it exactly that God has stopped doing on Saturday? This is where we come back to my title, because one way of answering this is to say that God created the world with the potential to continue to endure and the potential to continue to follow certain patterns. And that is to say, God created natural laws that are observable to us, just like looking up and seeing the heavens that are observable to us, natural laws that allow us to do science and discover them, and through them to discover what God does. So in other words, we get the seventh-day argument for the existence of science, that, in other words, the only way the universe can continue to persist within a created world, within the idea of a world that is subject to a religious notion of creation, is precisely that the only way that the world continues to go on, if God is not actively intervening, is because God has created a world that can continue to create itself. Now, there are various iterations of those kinds of arguments, not necessarily those that specifically evoke the Sabbath, but there are other arguments from this time that suggest that the world was created with the potential to unfold or the potential to develop. And these arguments come up again and again when Newton tries to provide a logical argument for the Copernican system of the world, or when Darwin attempts to show how species could evolve from the other to the other rather than be specially created. All of this comes back to a really important question for science communication. Do we actually need to believe any of these religious ideas? I have spoken a lot about historical theories of theology, historical theories of philosophy. And I'm going to say, do we need to be religious? Do we need to get deeply into theology to really understand what science is about? And I'm not going to answer that. But what I am going to say is that if we are communicating to religious publics, if we're communicating to publics that are familiar with this, we do need to understand this history. We do need to understand these contexts. And that often it is the case that when we try to communicate to religious publics, we begin from either a position in which we set the religious aspects of people's beliefs aside as if they don't matter, or we address them as potential moments of hostility. What I'm interested in looking at is moments in which religious mandates actually provide a positive case, not just what we might call mere compatibility. So there's a bunch of books, and I deliberately chose some of these titles. Can a Darwinian be a Christian? Can you believe in God and evolution? And it seems like the best case scenario, and the conclusion of both of these books is really, well, yeah, you can. And that's not really the most appealing way to discuss things like evolution with religious publics. And it sort of automatically leads to the question about not just whether or not you could believe in God and evolution, but really whether or not you should. So what would a positive argument for engaging science and religion look like? It would probably look a little bit like this. This is an article I wrote last year about the decision of the Jewish Orthodox Union certifies certain kosher foods to not grant kosher status to Impossible Foods' purely vegan, plant-based artificial pork product. The entire argument being not that there is anything from the basis of the ingredients that would cause a problem, but rather that there are problematic perceptions and confusions that may arise from something that identifies as pork. But one of the rabbis who I spoke to when I was working on this article made what I think is a good example of a positive argument. He suggests that in the Messianic age, in the redemption of the world, one thing that is supposedly going to happen is that all foods will become permitted and that the pig will become kosher. How that's supposed to happen, whether that is, through some miraculous intervention or whatever, is not clear. But he actually says, perhaps this is how it happens. Perhaps through science and technology, we bring about the conditions to fulfill prophecy. And again, do we have to believe it? Do we need to believe in that prophecy or in the fulfillment of a messianic age in order to communicate science? I'm not saying that we do, but I am saying that this is helpful for us to understand and to engage, because this creates a sense of saying, not just, yes, you can have technology and still live by your religious values, but technology can help you express and fulfill those religious values in a new and different way. The idea that this is something to celebrate, as Rabbi Schwartz says in the article that I quote him in, and not just something to tolerate, is, I think, something that's incredibly important. So to get back, I want to just get back to this quote again. I think that sense of celebration and awe and wonder is part of what's going on here with Nelson. I think one of the reasons why there was such a backlash is because he's saying this in the 21st century and not 40 years earlier. As a matter of fact, Bill Nelson, some people will know, was an astronaut in the 1980s, wrote a memoir in the 1980s, was in the shuttle mission immediately preceding the Challenger disaster. His memoir came out after that one, and he was reflecting a little bit on what happened with the Challenger. But he also reflected on the fact that one of his first reflections upon reaching space was basically quoting the exact same passage from the book of Psalms that he quoted 40 years later. So I don't think his religious views have changed over those 40 years, or his views about what science has to say to that. But I do think that what's changed is our political climate between 1980s and now. So what does that lead us to? It leads us to a model of constructive and positive engagement that goes beyond mere compatibility and perhaps beyond mere toleration. It gives us something else to go on, and something that we can use, a background that we can use, cultural touch points we can use when we're looking to do science communication. I'm done, I think, and I want to make sure we still have some time for questions. So I'm going to stop right there. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Adam. We do have a couple of minutes for questions, and I, of course, could talk to you for hours about this, but I want to encourage folks to enter questions that you have in the chat or unmute yourself and ask them directly, whatever works for you. So much to chew on here, but I love it. Yeah, just scream it out. I love sort of the way you ended too, because the shift in other spaces, and when we think about other forms of diversity, away from sort of the mere tolerance language into inclusion, has not really yet translated or been embraced by scientists talking about religion. So if we can not merely tolerate, but actually include and embrace religion in certain senses. And I think the theme of wonder and awe has been one that has recurred throughout this conference, starting with the workshop DeSann Davis gave on Wednesday. And so the capacity to galvanize those powerful emotions is something that religion and science really have in common, and that science can learn from religion. So a really good perspective shift, I think, for me.
Great. Yeah, I mean, I think it's interesting. I feel like, especially during the pandemic, this is something I appreciate. I see the link to our new book is in there. One of the things that we said is when we first started writing the book, it was before the pandemic had started. But so we were kind of in real time watching how various religious communities reacted to the pandemic. And of course, I think what mostly got publicity was stuff like, people trying to use religious exemptions to avoid getting vaccinated or to avoid wearing masks. But we also saw all these religious communities that embrace Zoom, much like this, even if their religions had previously prohibited the using of electronics on certain times and days. We also saw, the Pope address an empty St. Peter's Square on Easter and still reach a wider audience than anyone else. here's a great question about how we talk about climate change. I think that that's definitely something that many people have discussed. I think one of the ways that we can do that is to say that there are scriptural arguments within the Christian tradition, particularly, that talk about stewardship of the world and caretaking of the world, and the idea that God has given the world to us. We talk a bit in the book about what's called eco-theology, about the idea that there is a moral mandate to preserve creation precisely because God has created it. And that is a language that has had historical resonances. To some extent in the United States, the creation of the national park system was driven by activists who were motivated by religious ideas about preserving nature, precisely because they felt that preserving nature and preserving what they considered to be wild and natural spaces was a way to give people who are detached and decoupled from God a space to go to where they could get in touch with it. If you think about it, back in the 19th century, one of the really important places in which religious experiences took place was the camp revival meeting. And part of that was for people to get out of the summers in the cities. I often joke that this is a great example of technology and religion working well together, because you don't have things like these camp meetings in the 19th century if air conditioning is already invented, but you can't have mega churches in the 20th century unless they are. And so that's another really clear example about how technology changes religious practice. But again, the whole idea of the camp meeting was not just to take people out of the cities and take people to a place that was physically cooler, but it was also to take them into a place where they could commune with nature. And that I think there's still a presence for that. I think that still exists, even in our air-conditioned world.
And I love the point too that you don't have to believe in order to acknowledge and engage with certain religious beliefs and communities, and that it's okay for people to arrive at the same conclusion from different means, and to acknowledge one another's rationales is valid.
Yeah. All right, going down through the chat space. Some of this can be applied to traditional environmental knowledge and how that often stems from indigenous religion. I think it does, and I think that we need to be very precise and careful about it. When one of the things that we talk about, particularly in the last chapter of the book, are the protests surrounding the 30-meter telescope, and the fact that astronomers would point to. So for those who are unfamiliar, there's an effort to build a space telescope on Mauna Kea in Hawaii, on land that is considered sacred to indigenous Hawaiians. And there's been long protests, there have been debates about the consultation process and the approval process. To some people, this looks a lot like the debates over things like the Dakota Access Pipeline and the sovereignty of indigenous people over the dispositions of their land. But again, because it's a telescope, it picks up different resonances. And especially because when we talk about land having a certain cultural value, that often gets expressed as religious value. Whether that is culture or religion is a little bit of a slippery categorization issue that we can't always judge, with perfect clarity. But one of the things that we did see were astronomers who were basically saying that Native Hawaiian concerns about building this telescope should not be considered important because they are religious, and therefore they are impeding the progress of science, and it is therefore no different than when the Catholic Church oppressed Galileo. Whether it's a telescope 400 years ago or a telescope today, religion hates telescopes. And from the perspective of looking at this realistically, from the perspective of looking at this in terms of who holds the power, a multinational consortium of science forces or people who have been dispossessed of their land for over a century, this is purely absurd. But I think that means is that when we look at the questions of engaging traditional environmental knowledge, we also have to look at the power dynamics that have repressed that knowledge or have supplanted that knowledge. And sometimes historically, it's been very contentious because Western religious ideas and Western scientific ideas have sometimes worked hand in hand to displace indigenous knowledge. In European colonialism in Africa, that was certainly the story. In colonialism in the United States, that was part of the story. And so recovering those forms of knowledge and understanding how to arbitrate them can be really subtle. One of the really, I think, bizarre circumstances that we've seen have been anthropologists who have been resisting the repatriation of Native American human remains that they claim are vital for scientific research, because they claim that to accede to the religious request that their ancestors be buried is somehow tantamount to creationism. And throwing the word creationism in there is deliberately inflammatory. But I think we would have less of an issue talking about the repatriation of your ancestors' bones or my ancestors' bones if we weren't claiming this kind of exclusive right. And I think that we need to be, I think, sensitive to these larger political dynamics that always go around, and the power dynamics that go around religion and science as well.
And throwing it back to your opening remarks too, Adam, the idea that what belongs in the science circle and what belongs in the religion circle is not self-evident, and that's a negotiation that's happening too. So one thing, I'm a terrible moderator because I just have a difficult time shutting down conversation that's interesting. But there is another session starting now. And so
thank you all. I'm sorry I couldn't get to more questions, but I think they put out ways you can reach out, and I would love to continue the conversation. So thank you all.
Thank you so much, Adam. Thank you all.
Thank you again. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.